So one of the things that I think is really difficult, but also very beautiful about following the way of Jesus is the way that he not just invites us to change our actions and behaviors, although that's a big part of it, but also to completely reimagine entire categories of how we think about the world and our lives. So what does it mean to love now in the light of the story of Jesus? What does it mean to be fulfilled as a human being looking back on his story? Even entire categories like judgment are completely reinvented when they are understood through the story of the gospel. Now is the time for the judgment of the world, for the prince of this world to be driven out, because when I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. That is what the Son of God thinks Easter is about. Except, if that is what is happening on the cross, then it seems to me at least that something has gone very wrong in our shorthand explanations of Easter. First, the cross is the judgment of the world. See, I've often been told that judgment is what happens after you die. Like you stand before the pearly gates and God opens up a big book and he sends you either to the good place or the bad one. Jesus tells me that it's here in Holy Week on the cross that the world was judged. Now, I think part of our problem is that our default is to assume that judgment must mean retribution. You did a bad thing's got to happen to you. But it's not what we see here in Jesus. What's reflected here is an imagination of sin, not primarily as infringement, but maybe something more like corruption or sickness. Sin is not when you break the rule. Sin is when you have trouble seeing what's good for you in the first place. Not knowing what's good for your neighbor, not seeing what's good for your world, not grasping what a good God desperately wants for you. So the judgment of the world is not when the world gets what's coming to it. The judgment of the world is when all of our brokenness is held up in front of us and God finally refuses to let us look away. I've already talked about my dog today. Cedar was one of the most beautifully, brilliantly oblivious dogs I've ever met. Look, Cedar has passed. There's no point besmirching his reputation. So let me put this out there before I begin. He was a wonderful dog. But every once in a while, Cedar would decide that we had been gone a little too long or that he needed a little more stimulation than we had provided. And we would come home to find the kids' artwork, maybe left on a table, now torn to shreds on the floor, or a compost bag left unsecured, now scattered across the room, a child's stuff he loved, let's say, just a little too recklessly. And if you ever wanted to see a beautiful, brilliant dog all of a sudden turn into a black hole of awareness, all you had to do was pick up any shred of that mess and hold it near him. All of a sudden, it was invisible to him. You were invisible to him. He could not see anything. He would avert his gaze and turn his head to avoid even a hint of acknowledgement that anything had happened. Guys, we do that all the time. We ignore each other. We acquire more than we need. We accumulate excess at the expense of our neighbor. We avert our eyes when someone else is sacrificed for the common good. As long as they remain nameless so that we can maintain plausible deniability. We outsource sin so that we can pretend we don't see our mess. And on the cross, God says, no more. This is what your violence looks like. This is what your disdain for each other does. This is the pain that your blaming and your scapegoating manufactures in your world. And it's no longer hidden, and you can't look away. That's what judgment is. It's not God's retribution. It's not God's violence. It's not because God wants anyone to suffer. The cross exists because God wants us to finally stop passing our pain back and forth between ourselves forever. The cross is where we stop pretending we're okay. And we come face to face with what we do to each other all the time in this world. The judgment of God is not violence. The judgment of God is when we are finally honest with our violence. Father, forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing.